agreements, secret and explicit diplomacy, economic sanctions and military losses. All these factors in one way or another affect the course of hostilities. But the essence of the hybrid confrontation is to abandon the classical methods of warfare. While the aggressor does not comply with generally accepted rules, it is demanding its opponents to comply with the rules of the game. Deception and manipulation, false accusations and double standards have become an effective weapon in the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Мы им дали целеуказания, куда им нужно.
Acting on behalf of the fabricated LPR and DPR, Russia got the opportunity to officially not recognize its participation in the war. However, all military hardware from tanks and missiles down to the last button was delivered to the army of the so-called Novorossiya from Russian warehouses. This is about the ATO history of the war, episode 59. In 2014, the Russian Federation committed an act of armed aggression against Ukraine. The war has lasted for several years. Hot on the heels, we're studying the course of this war and tracing the links between military operations, diplomacy, politics, and economics. We're trying to understand how it was and, most importantly, why it happened. On July 16th, the next 32nd so-called humanitarian convoy crossed the border of Ukraine. According to the Russian Emergencies Ministry, 100 trucks brought about 1,000 tons of various goods to Donetsk and Luhansk. Food, medicine, stationery and books were registered as cargo. Interestingly, Russian journalists kept silent about the fuel and ammunition that were delivered by the convoy. It is important to note here that having a railway at its disposal, Russia still carried out the bulk of military traffic by train. Trains transporting military hardware and fuel were unloaded in Ilovaisk and Debaltseve. Local residents testified to this fact, and this was reported by undercover intelligence units. And by the summer of 2015, the humanitarian convoys lost their meaning as a way of supplying the pseudo-republics. However, as a distracting maneuver and as an element of propaganda, Putin's so-called white trucks worked perfectly. The unloading of each convoy was widely reported by both local and Russian journalists. The white trucks attracted attention and literally obscured the actual supply columns in the information field. Observing the movement of humanitarian convoy, the journalists did not even notice any trains and vehicles that were transporting military cargo. Such synchronicity caused a great deal of confusion and conjecture. Without seeing the huge flow of ammunition commensurate to the demands of the army, local residents and even journalists refused to believe in that the militants were activating on the theater of war. Assessing the intensity of the fighting only by ear, the locals mistakenly believed that the truce was being violated by the Ukrainian army. Already on July 17th, traditionally having received additional ammunition, Russian terrorists became more active along the entire line of demarcation. In the area of the Butivka mine, near the city of Avdiivka, a soldier of the 93rd Brigade was killed when a mortar shell hit a dugout. In the area of Krymske on the Bakhmut highway, a soldier of the 24th Brigade was fatally wounded in a small arms battle. In total, Ukraine lost 3 of its soldiers on that day. On July 18th, leaders of the Kremlin's hybrid army announced the start of withdrawal of heavy weapons with a caliber of less than 100 mm from the line of demarcation. However, the so-called press secretary of the military command of the DPR, Eduard Basurin, noted that the military hardware will not be removed from Donetsk, Debaltseve, Horlivka and Shastya. The day did not go without battles and losses. In the area of Shastya, 2 Ukrainian soldiers received fragmental wounds as a result of shelling from an automatic grenade launcher. Near Mariupol, 1 soldier died from a mine blast, and in the Volnovaha area, a serviceman of the 72nd Brigade was fatally wounded. The Donetsk direction remained a hot spot. As a result of the shelling of Avdiivka, 2 local residents were killed, and in Yasinovata, a Ukrainian reconnaissance group fell under mortar fire. Unfortunately, as a result of numerous fragmental wounds, Ukrainian volunteer Konstantin Dovyu was killed. It should be understood that the fighting is a constant movement, and constant strengthening of positions is the direct duty of a soldier. Ukrainian troops were not sitting in concrete defense. Where this was possible, reconnaissance of the enemy forces was conducted, and even local counterattacks were launched. On July 19th, the fighters of the Donbas battalion in the Shirokina area took away a terrorist infantry fighting vehicle. It suffered damages to optical devices and a broken track, but nevertheless the captured vehicle was towed away to the location of the Ukrainian troops. On July 20th, militants fired at Ukrainian positions 60 times along the entire line of demarcation. Heavy artillery was used 11 times. Mortars were fired 19 times. In the area of the Stanitsa Luhanska, the use of the Grad multi-launch rocket system was registered and an enemy tank fired on the territory of the Avdiivka coal chemical plant. Residential quarters of Avdiivka were hit hard, and near the town of Krasnohorivka, a Ukrainian soldier of the 28th Brigade was killed. It is not so important who the enemy is. It is more important that they do not open fire. On July 21st, at a meeting of the contact group in Minsk, the mutual withdrawal of weapons with a caliber of up to 100 mm was agreed to. However, any peace initiative works against the Kremlin, and traditionally, the militants violated the ceasefire. On July 21st, Ukraine lost 2 soldiers. On the same day, in addition to advanced positions that were bombarded every day, Mayorsk was hit. As a result of the shelling, militants accidentally destroyed a civilian vehicle, and 2 local innocent residents were seriously injured. In the area of the village of Bogdanivka in the Donetsk Oblast, a mobile group of tanks of militants was noticed. Having fired at the positions of the Ukrainian military forces, they returned to the areas of withdrawal of heavy weapons. In addition to that, the Ukrainian positions were fired upon with the use of anti-tank guided missiles, ATGMs, and on this same day, the flight of a reconnaissance drone over Mariupol was registered. As a reminder, a tank burns more than 100 liters of fuel per hour. Spare parts for a combat vehicle cannot be bought at a car parts store, and the price of one ATGM is comparable to the cost of a car. War is very expensive, not only in terms of money and resources. It should always be remembered that in defending the country from aggression, ordinary civilian people, specialists in various fields, who had not even thought about a military career, joined the ranks of the Army and the Ministry of Internal Affairs. On July 22nd, in the area of the Butivka mine, near the Donetsk airport, during a special operation, 2 soldiers of the battalion of the Special Purpose Patrol Service Harpoon were killed. Yevhen Birukov and Mykola Hordychuk were the most ordinary people who performed a special mission. For example, Hordychuk was a successful musician before he was called to fight in the war. On the night of July 23rd, the militants shelled the Stanitsa Luhanska village. In addition to small arms, grenade launchers and mortars were fired. As a result of this attack, several buildings caught on fire, and a local resident was injured. After a counterattack, the enemy's artillery was suppressed, though as a result of this sudden attack, 1 soldier of the 128th Brigade was killed. It should be understood that even when the guns are silent, the hybrid war continues. This struggle is not only for territory and strategic heights, but also for the mentalities of the local innocent people. And besides fresh blood, this war always requires resources. On July 23rd, another so-called humanitarian convoy number 33 crossed the Ukrainian border. Officially, Russia declared that it was donating food, medicine and basic necessities to residents of the Donbas. The next 100 trucks brought another 1,000 tons of various goods. On each vehicle there was a banner, Humanitarian Aid from Russia. And here it is important to understand that an ordinary citizen does not care about global politics and cunning diplomacy. An average person needs food, security, and wants to understand what is happening around. Despite the constant shelling and damage to the infrastructure, on July 23rd, in Stanitsa Luhanska, they managed to restore the work of the wired radio as an additional source of information about the events happening in their native city.
243, ответ 245.
On the night of July 24th, the shelling of Stanitsa Luhanska started again, as a result of attacks on Ukrainian positions from automatic grenade launchers and machine guns. A military serviceman and a local resident were injured. Note that the dense vegetation in the area contributed to the operations of small reconnaissance and sabotage groups. Russian special forces acted along the banks of the Seversky Donets River and carried out reconnaissance of the leading edge of the Ukrainian positions. The shelling of the front post was an attempt to break the defense system. On July 24th, one such group engaged the Ukrainian military troops in the Popasna region, and as a result of the short battle, 4 interventionists were destroyed. The mention of Russian soldiers is not accidental here. The very next day, on June 25, 2015, at the control station Berezova in the Donetsk Oblast, Ukrainian border guard officers detained a KAMAZ truck carrying heavy ammunition. It got to the checkpoint from the temporarily uncontrolled territory. There were 2 men in military uniforms in the vehicle. Later, it was established that one of them was a citizen of Ukraine, and the other one was a professional serviceman of the Russian army with the rank of major. The purpose of the trip was the delivery of ammunition to the base of the group Aplot. Understanding the situation, Russian citizen Vladimir Starkov did not resist and admitted that he was doing military service in the city of Novocherkassk of the Rostov region of Russia as the head of the missile artillery service. Later, Starkov testified that about 2,000 so-called advisors from among the regular military armed forces of the Russian Federation are operating in the Donbas as a part of illegal armed groups. Understanding that the fate of a prisoner of war was much easier than the fate of a war criminal and counting on the exchange of captured Ukrainian soldiers, Major Starkov provided all the evidence to the military police forces and fully admitted his guilt.
Не знаю, я действующий офицер, я послужил 19 лет. 19 лет я все-таки послужил в российской армии, и меня теперь не признают, говорят, что такого не было.
But as always, the Russian Federation officially renounced Major Starkov, despite his testimony and 19 years of service. 2 months later, on September 25, 2015, the Donetsk Regional Court sentenced Vladimir Starkov to 14 years in prison, not as a serviceman, but as a criminal. The main article of the prosecution was worded as illegal participation in an aggressive war.
Уважаемый Владимир Владимирович, прошу все-таки признать, что я действительно военный.
On December 1st, 2015, Vladimir Starkov was exchanged for Ukrainian prisoner of war Andriy Hrychanov. Russia did not recognize its soldier. The Ukrainian side had to undertake all the negotiations regarding the exchange with representatives of the so-called DNR. One of the conditions of the exchange deal was the pardoning of Vladimir Starkov. The day before the exchange, the president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, signed the relevant document. The Ukrainian officer Hrychanov returned to his homeland and continued his military service. The Russian officer Starkov simply disappeared.
Никаких вооруженных сил, никаких инструкторов российских даже на юго-востоке Украины нет.
Их там нет.
Проход застыл.
Привет, мам. Все, моя вернулся. Ну не плачь. Ма, не плачь. Рядом с президентом. В безпеці. Ма, все хорошо.